Hello, good morning and good afternoon around the world. I will present to you about the import and export of medical cannabis. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview. We are talking about international trade. We know that we have to clear customs. We know that we have to get licenses. And this is a snapshot about the current situation around the world. We will see that for customs, the content of CBD and THC in the cannabis product is important. But let's start at the beginning. What is a customs department? So every shipment that crosses an international border has to be inspected by customs. That's usually under the Ministry of Finance in most countries. They will check whether the shipment needs import clearance is needed for every shipment, whether import duties need to be paid, and what licenses are required. For that, there is a customs tariff. In the customs tariff, all products that can be traded are listed, and every product has a code number, the so-called HS code. HS stands for Harmonized System. This is used in most countries in the world. And for cannabis and cannabis products, and this is what makes it complicated, there are different HS codes depending on the product itself. Here are some examples. 5302 would be true hemp. We will find out in a moment the difference between hemp and cannabis. And here we have the different detailed not spun hemp, not spun jute. Okay, all this is not a problem. Here we have cannabis. This is from Canada as an example. 0602 is live plants, 1209 is seeds, 1211 is plants and parts thereof. Then we have resin, it's a different number again. Oils, extracts, tinctures, different number again. You get the idea. And then we have different types of cannabis. What's the difference here? We need to know that for customs purposes, because hemp is not under any drug laws. But what is hemp as opposed to cannabis? Hemp is also the cannabis plant. So we have here different cannabis plants. Some of you may know this much better than I. But the point here is that in most countries, the THC content for hemp cannot exceed 0.2 or 0.3%. Depending on the country, we will go into detail a little bit more in a moment. In some countries, it's more, 0.5% in Paraguay, 1% in Peru and Uruguay. We will find out that in South Africa, it's a lot less. What are all these regulations for the customs departments around the world based on? That's the UN Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs from 1961. 1961 was a totally different time from what it is now, and the customs regulations, laws in every country were made since then. Now we all know that the situation has changed, and now we have to see how much this is affecting our import and export. So cannabis is listed in the list of drugs together with, for example, cocaine. Here's an example of what has happened in the meantime. This is the imports of cannabis oil to Germany, just an example, right? We see a huge increase. And the legal status has changed around the world. You see some countries here are green, then medical cannabis is used is legal if authorized by a physician, by a doctor. Blue is legal for any use, and gray is simply illegal. This is a snapshot from 2018. Things have changed. We come to change in a moment. Now let's go to some countries. We start with the European Union. The European Union is in change now. We have changes by country, and every country is also changing. I contacted the EU delegation office and asked them what is the current status. There is no joint agreement within the EU yet. So some sources that I found said that CBD is not a narcotic. Others said that it is a narcotic. They agree that a GMP license is required. There are some mutual recognition agreements, for example, between the EU and Australia. So if you have a GMP license in Australia, this will be accepted in the EU. But if you have a GMP license in Canada, that will not be accepted in the EU. So you have to go into detail. Industrial cannabis, which is hemp, will be up to 0.2% according to the EU. No, but not every country. Belgium has a zero tolerance. This slide is an example of Germany. You see a long list of laws you have to follow. So Germany allows medical cannabis, but you have a lot of regulations to follow. The UK says that cannabis products are novel food, which is a different can of worms again. So import and export is possible in the UK. So far, several importers have received licenses, but only one exporter. This is from the 17th of September 2020, so I said that there is a big change in the laws everywhere. In the United States, hemp has been removed from the list of drugs. So the DEA will not follow hemp anymore, right? What is the meaning here? In the United States, it means cannabis plants that has not more than 0.3% THC. This compares to the EU 0.2. But there are there are states in the US that say, okay, we allow 0% THC, it's totally outlawed. How about CBD? This is changing. Also at the election in the United States on 3rd of November, 3 states voted on whether to allow medical cannabis or cannabis for any use. So we see this is in flux and is changing constantly. This presentation is already outdated by the time I present it. So if the THC level is below 0.3%, then I can import it into that state. Doesn't mean into the country, because there are states that don't allow it. This is the patchwork we have in the United States as of 1st of October this year. Now, it's in constant change, and here you see Florida is allowing medical marijuana. I talked to these German people who wanted to export CBD medical cannabis to the United States, and they actually went to Florida, to Miami port in advance and talked to the customs department there. And on first contact, the customs officer said, no, marijuana, no, is not allowed. Oh, by the way, the word marijuana, we use the word medical cannabis, right? Sounds more professional. Yeah, so it's not allowed. And then they went through the law and said, yeah, it's allowed now. And then the customs department agreed. So when you want to build up a new business, make sure that you don't just bring the goods in, talk to the people first. Canada Canada, we always say it's very free. Well, in Canada also, cannabis products are a controlled substance. 0.3% THC is the same threshold, and you need licenses. Australia, interesting here, export of medical cannabis is allowed as long as the domestic supply is not affected. I find that very interesting, so they understand it's an important product and should not be exported if it is needed in the country. Here we have a list of new medical cannabis approvals. This is not the list of companies, but this is the list of new approvals. So it's all adding up on top. So this is a growing industry in Australia. South Africa is considered the most relaxed country in Africa. But when we look at it, they have packaging requirements on the medical cannabis product. If these packaging requirements are not met, then the allowed percentage of THC is 0.001%, and even CBD is limited to 0.0075%. That's almost nothing, right? So, other than that, for industrial purposes, that's hemp, 0.2% THC is allowed, but there are different sources. Another source said 0.1%. So if you deal with that country now, import of CBD products within these limits do not seem to require an import license if you are a pharmacy and so forth, right? Export is possible. Now, I met this case of Lesotho. Lesotho is a country within South Africa, totally surrounded by South Africa. So they have no port. So if they want to bring the product to the port, then they have to go through South Africa, and they need all kinds of licenses for that. China is the largest producer of hemp and also one of the biggest exporters of medical cannabis in the world. Their threshold is 0.3%. If it's over that, it's a controlled drug. Production is limited to 3 provinces, so they're very regulated in China, right? And they use the CBD products exclusively for cosmetics, serums, creams, not for medical use. Import is not allowed, according to some sources. It is allowed under licenses with other sources. Now, the interesting thing is that China is required to import hemp from the United States, according to the Phase 1 US-China trade agreement, with which it is not clear whether this can or should contain CBD or not. Coming to Thailand. So Thailand is the first country in Southeast Asia to legalize medical cannabis. Yeah, everybody is very happy about it. Let's look into this. Import and export was approved by the cabinet on 4th of August 2020. So that's not too long ago. But that does not mean that we can import and export cannabis products now. Now it's in the process where the regulations down to the operational level are being written. So we did that some interviews here, and we found out that import is allowed only for government agencies for the first 5 years, starting last year actually, and that will change, maybe change after that, we cannot predict. Export should be allowed, but it is not. Yeah, so the cabinet has approved it, but there are no regulations for the Narcotic Control Board and for customs and so forth to export this yet, and apparently no decision or no regulation is expected before the end of COVID. So the farmers hope that this will be approved next year. Once import is approved, it will be allowed for companies that are properly registered, have the licenses. Now you get the pattern, right? Before you can import and export cannabis products in every country, you need to be properly registered with the proper government agency, and you need to have the proper licenses. There's no way around that. Medical cannabis is treated in many countries like a medicine for which you need the same thing. So that's okay. What is interesting here is that tourists may be allowed to bring their own supply of medical cannabis into Thailand. Same is being discussed for other countries also. Be careful, this is so far a suggestion, but we are allowed to dream, aren't we? So the international trade of medical cannabis is increasing. There is more and more trade in international cannabis, and that is good. We are all for a world where everybody can trade with everybody else. The regulations are different according to what is hemp, which is an industrial product for textiles and so forth, and what is medical cannabis. The difference is usually in the level of THC, where every country or group of countries has their own ideas how much is allowed in hemp. Now, some countries also look at the level of CBD. Some countries, and here I mean the United States, they look at what product, what plant the CBD product is made from. So regardless of having less than 0.3% of THC, they look at what plant did it come from. Did it come from a hemp plant, or did it come from another variety of the cannabis plant? Whatever we say today may be outdated tomorrow, especially I'm 100% sure it will be outdated next year. So before you start any import or export of medical cannabis and cannabis products, make sure that you get yourself updated. It is a good idea to contact a lawyer. So if you have any questions for now, then I'll be very happy to answer them. I can also add one thing about transportation. If you import and export medical cannabis, you have to transport them. So CBD oil is an oil, and as logistics people, all alerts go on because of flammable liquids. Now, CBD oil is not a flammable liquid. You still need a safety data sheet, but that safety data sheet will say it's not restricted for transport. And the other thing about transport is the value. So I'm not really familiar with the values, but I read on the internet that the value of medical cannabis can be $7,000 to $8,000 per kilo. Now, in transportation, for example, in air transportation, we consider everything over $1,000 per kilo in value as valuable cargo. Right? You have to transport this like you transport money or jewelry. In the United States, I was told many people, yes, they do the same, use the same trucks they would use for cash in transit. Now, in other countries, which I don't want to mention now because this one producer told me, they just use normal trucks and hope for the best. Right? So be careful about that aspect of transportation. If you do land transport, sea transport, air transport, in your import or export, check out the value, talk to your insurance company. All right, now we go. Questions? Okay, the question is, you're referring to Thailand, right? For now, the Thai government or government agencies are the only ones allowed to import cannabis products, medical cannabis products for the first 5 years. Is there a chance that this will be reduced? Well, in Thailand, predicting anything political over the next 5 years is pretty impossible, right? So I will not try to make any guess. Does that answer your question? Okay. You have a question, please? Okay, thank you very much for your question. The first question, does China export medical cannabis to Thailand? I don't know that. I checked that, when did I check that? Is a while ago, they didn't, but that can have changed in the meantime. You know, this is a business that is in constant. Right, if you are interested in that, remember that government agencies are the ones that are allowed to import, nobody else. So you will have to talk to the government agencies. Yeah, you talk to the pharmaceutical agency, I would think, right? And the second question, import into China at this moment is not allowed yet. I have not enough connections into the Chinese government to predict whether they are thinking of changing that. But I wouldn't think so, because they are one of the biggest producers, and that is good for their country. Yep, you're welcome. Okay, in that case, I would like to thank you very much. Now, for any further questions, my email addresses are here in the slide. Now, or you can contact the organizers of CISW. They will connect you with me. Thank you very much.